I got called out, boys and girls, called out for what was said to be an unintentional lie in my Starfield review. Oh, baby. So basically what happened is that Joseph, a member of our Discord server, which you should absolutely join if you're not already a member, we have a great time over here, he sent a message pointing out that he felt as though something I said in my Starfield review, which is doing very well thanks to you guys, shout out to all of you who watched it. Basically, he said that I unintentionally lied in my Starfield review a bit. He says that I said, planets are just a randomly generated zone whenever you land, but that's not really true. I did some testing to prove otherwise. And basically what he goes on to show, and you can check it out for yourself on the server, is that Starfield actually does support contiguous landing zones and tiles, meaning that you could land in New Atlantis and then land directly adjacent to it, just outside the invisible wall, such that you could still see it in the distance, though you might not be able to reach it. So as you can see here, he's landed in this adjacent tile. Normally, when you're playing the game, the only way that you would ever see New Atlantis is if you land in the landing zone, like right here. But now he's landed pretty far away, but he's still able to see the city. It's just the next tile over, and he hops out of his ship, and you'll see a couple of weird things like this that I'll explain in just a moment with him like floating and flying. Again, I'll explain that in a minute. But you can see he's able to move over to New Atlantis just fine, barring some hitching and bugs and weird stuttering and pop-in and stuff. But he's able to get there without having landed at that zone. So it is technically possible. And listen, one of my goals in life is to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. So if I am wrong about something, I want to be corrected. And in this case, I am happy to let you know that I was wrong. Technically speaking, you can actually jump to adjacent tiles and they are contiguous. If you go to New Atlantis or Neon or whatever, in theory, you can go to the next tile over and then the next tile over and the next one and the next one. And you could, again, in theory, go all the way around a planet in Starfield, landing back to where you started. But I know what you're thinking, Luke, if that's the case, why doesn't the game allow you to do that? Why is this something that's just been revealed now with footage of a character flying and doing all sorts of weird stuff in the air? Well, this is because it's not actually the gotcha that I think Starfield fans will think that this is. You see, this can only be achieved by use of console commands and with a lot of patience. Basically, what you have to do is you have to go into the game, use a console command known as show all map markers 0, which is something you can also use in like Skyrim or Fallout 4. And basically it just turns all of the map markers off. Then you end up with a screen that looks like this. And normally you would have the big diamond, which he'll show here in a screen cap in just a second, that shows New Atlantis as a landing zone on Jemison. As you can see, the lodge is normally shown here. You can select it, fast travel to it, land in New Atlantis, and it's no big deal. However, he's turned that off completely, meaning he can now select the directly adjacent tile by selecting the pixel that is next to the landing zone pixel that Bethesda assigned to the lodge and to New Atlantis. That's right, apparently landing zones in Starfield are roughly equivalent to the pixels that you will see on the map screen. So if we're actually in Starfield and we're playing, if you zoom in, you can see it gets a little pixelated on these corners and edges. Each one of those pixels is a different landing zone. There is apparently a little bit of overlap. People have tested the crap out of this and used very complicated methods to make micro adjustments where they move their mouse like one pixel over so they can select the next one. And apparently it's not perfect. There are some cases where landing zones overlap over like sub-pixels and things, but roughly speaking, every pixel is a different landing zone. So once he removed the HUD, he went in, selected the adjacent pixel, and was able to land just like you would normally, but this time with fresh points of interest. As you can see out in the distance, these are freshly generated. There are some floating boulders and things, but that's normal. And in the distance, we can see New Atlantis, even though normally you wouldn't be able to see this because when you land in Starfield, the landing zone is covered by this marker, which is let's just say a lot bigger than a single pixel. So it will block you from selecting the adjacent tile because it covers up so much of the landing area that you can't actually select the adjacent pixel. Now, I've seen people on Twitter that have told me they've managed to do it without turning off the HUD, but every time I've asked them to provide me footage of it or video capture of them doing it, they all of a sudden stop replying. So I don't know if they're just capping or if they all had their phone's battery die at the same time. I have no idea, but that to me has not been confirmed. Maybe it's possible, but it seems as though this whole thing is only actually possible if you're using console commands, which is why this guy is able to fly and is able to move so quickly through the air. It's because he's using console commands and developer commands to allow him to mess with the game in a way that normal players wouldn't. Yes, technically speaking, Starfield's landing zones and fish bowls are contiguous and you can go from one to the next. However, the vast majority of players, 99% of them, will never see this or do this because the game wasn't designed for you to, which is why they put massive freaking tile diamonds over top of the landing zone so that you can't select the adjacent tile. Furthermore, Bethesda seems really insistent on not letting you explore a planet in its entirety as one contiguous thing. They really wanted to avoid you doing that, which is why they max out at 4 landing areas that are selected by the player. There can be other ones that Bethesda gives you, like the civilian outpost, but look at this. I have 4 landing zones that I've explored on this particular planet, and if I select one more, let's just say I want to go over here into the savannah. If I travel there, note I have 4 right now, and I travel. We'll let it load. Don't worry, this is a save file from like mid-game. We don't have any spoilers or anything. If I pull up the map, uh-oh, we lost one. Now we still have 4, but we should have 5. We selected a new spot. They deleted one of them. And if I go and select another landing area, let's say all the way over here, notice I have these 4. What happens when we travel again? It's gonna delete another one. I'll still have 4 total, but I will have lost one of the ones that I previously explored. In this case, it was the one up top. Clearly, Bethesda doesn't want you going from tile to tile, exploring a large area of the planet contiguously. It wasn't in their design doc. It's why you can't select the next pixel over, even if it is technically possible. That's not what Starfield is offering to players, because if it were, it would not require developer commands to do it. So again, it's like saying that, oh, in Elden Ring, you can technically fight the Elden Beast immediately, and you don't have to fight any other bosses if you use developer commands and just skip directly and teleport to that location. It's like, I guess technically that's true, but 99.9% of players are never going to do that, and that's not what the game was designed for. And I think it's fair to say that you have to fight all those other bosses before getting to the Elden Beast, because that's what the developers wanted you to do, and that's how the game was designed. Technically, yeah, you're right. You don't have to do it that way. You could do it a different way, but I think it's fair to describe it in the way the developers intended. And one last thing I do want to just be very, very clear on, because I've seen this thrown around a lot, and I think it's important to just clarify this because it's just not correct at all. You mentioned that I said planets are randomly generated zones. I didn't say that. What I said is that they are procedurally generated using seeds based on parent planet seeds and then sub-area microbiome seeds, and then those are also tied to the location on the actual surface that you selected. Furthermore, when you land on a planet, you don't actually get to explore it freely. A few points of interest are put on the map, but if you run too far off course, sometimes only a kilometer away from a point of interest, and other times up to 4 kilometers away, you'll be treated to an invisible wall telling you to return to your ship. The game doesn't actually give you planets to explore, as was promised by Todd Howard and Pete Hines in the lead up to the game's launch. It generates a small map each time you land that's built off of a seed from the given planet that you're landing on and where on that planet you've selected to land, whether it's a pre-assigned landing location with a point of interest on it or a random location that you choose. So in this case, if you selected a landing area, it would be the Epsilon seed, and then if you selected, say right here, it would be the frozen crevasses in the phraseology of Bear Grylls. That would be the sub seed effectively, and then if you selected that microbiome, but a little closer to shore, it would actually be coastal. See, it's frozen crevasses, but coast in parentheses, and that's the sub seed. So it's not randomly generated, it is procedurally generated. And if I ever let the word random slip, I will happily retract that now in a heartbeat, because that is not correct. It is not at all random. It is very much based on rules and procedures that they have established for this system. It is not random whatsoever. But at the end of the day, this is all kind of like stupid because like arguing over technicalities might be fun, but it doesn't change the core gameplay loop of Starfield if it is technically possible for you to do one thing or the other. Like, it's cool that you can go to the next tile over, but Bethesda didn't want you to do that, which is why they made it impossible unless you use developer commands to do it. Or another thing that got a lot of traction online was that Alana Pierce actually tried to fly into Pluto. It took her 7 hours to do, but she did eventually arrive. But when she got there, it was just a blank texture that got blurry and she passed through it because Bethesda didn't think anybody in their right minds would do that. So effectively, if this is the player, they did put planets out there. Like they put Mars and then they put maybe Jupiter. I guess we'll do like orange for Jupiter. And then way off in the distance, they did put Pluto as little bitty images or PNGs effectively. And then they use that to gauge the distance between the player because they show you how many astronomical units or kilometers away it is, so they can measure in real time in the engine how far away these objects are. And then when you fast travel, you zip closer and then it recalculates. Like say if you go over here to Mars, it will then redraw how far you are from these things. So if you are patient enough, you could fly all the way over here, but you're just reaching what is effectively a null object. Like it's not actually meant for you to do anything. And that's why when she got there, you can't like select the planet and land on it. You can't do any of that because again, it was never intended. It's basically just a null image object meant for you to be measured off of for distances, and that's about it. Like all of this stuff is interesting and I'm fascinated by it just as much as the next guy, but it doesn't actually change how Starfield is going to play for 99.9% of players who are never going to do these types of things. And I think the reason we find it interesting though is because Todd loves to tell sweet little lies, let's be honest. And I think in the marketing of this game, in the promises and the showcases of it, there was a dream sold to a lot of people of a vast galaxy sim where you could basically just fly between planets and solar systems and all this, and it would just be free exploration with Bethesda levels of environmental storytelling. And I don't think that those expectations were fair. I think anybody could have looked at this and seen that that didn't make a lot of sense and that it was probably going to end up being a good game, but far from perfect. However, a lot of people didn't look at it that way. A lot of people just took what was being told to them, listened to some YouTubers that hyped them up, and now they're at a point where they're having to go in with console commands and tweak game code and then spend 7 hours sitting and making micro adjustments in a ship to see if they can make the game what they hoped it would be. I mean, shout out to Alana Pierce. She's like a writer at Santa Monica Studio. Like she has a real job and she spent 7 hours doing this. It's crazy. Like I admire the dedication. This sounds like something I would do, which I guess the fact that it sounds crazy to me, but it's something I would do is like, that should probably be a wake-up call. But listen, at the end of the day, you're going to enjoy Starfield because Starfield, I think, as do many other people, I think it's a good game. It's just not the space sim, amazing game of the generation, genre-defining, back-scratching masterpiece that a lot of people were hoping it would be. It's a good game, but I don't think it's going to rewrite the book on any of this stuff. I think a lot of the stuff that it does in terms of space exploration, in terms of navigation, in terms of many of the things that are new to Bethesda, I think a lot of other games do it far, far better. And that's why it just doesn't quite live up to those high expectations a lot of people held for it. They looked at it and said, okay, well, it's Bethesda. Maybe they'll pull off what No Man's Sky was able to do, or what Elite Dangerous did, or what Star Citizen is trying to do, but with a Bethesda spin on it. And it just frankly was never going to be that. That's why everybody that's playing the game right now is saying, listen, it's not No Man's Sky. It's not Star Citizen. It's not Elite Dangerous. It's a good game, but it is still a Bethesda RPG that's set in space, and navigating space is like kind of clunky and weird, but it gets the job done. Like, you can have fun with it, but it's not magic. So all told, I will happily retract my statement that the landing zones and tiles generated are not contiguous, and I will instead say that the tiles generated are in fact contiguous if you are able to use console commands which disable achievements and then spend a good amount of time trying to select perfectly the pixel adjacent to the pixel that you previously landed on. End quote. But okay, that's enough. I know I'm being like really sassy and just kind of douchey about the whole thing. It's just at this point, like, we've been so fried about the Starfield stuff. I think we're all just kind of ready to talk about something else for a minute. Those of us playing Starfield want to just go play it without having to hear about it nonstop, or justify our enjoyment of it. And everybody else that doesn't care about Starfield just wants everybody else to shut up about how they should be talking about Starfield. So with this video, I'm going to try and stop contributing to the problem. We're going to take a little break while I work on the critique, and we're going to talk about some other games over the next couple of weeks. We got Lies of P, we've got Mortal Kombat 1X plus, whatever it's called. We got a bunch of games coming that are going to be fun to look at, so buckle up for those. But as always, thank you for watching. I love all of you more than you possibly know. I mean, you make my dreams a reality. I'm actually about to buy my first house because of you guys. I'm able to do that, provide for my wife and my 2 little boys by doing this for a living. It's crazy. I'm humbled by it every single day and never ever think I take it for granted. I really don't. We talk about video games, we joke about it, we act a little sassy about it because it's fun. Like, none of this is that serious. We're talking about video games, for God's sake. Like, it's not that serious at the end of the day. So I think we can have a little fun with it, but I never think I take it for granted. I really don't. I appreciate you guys watching and subscribing, liking, disliking, commenting, sharing your thoughts on the Discord server. I appreciate every single one of you. And with that, I'm going to stop blabbering. I'm bad at outros. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye.